As Joel and I talked about when we recorded this video after we interviewed Colonel Schaffner about everything going on with the US government last week in New York City, the story with Shopify is about AI. AI being ubiquitous in Shopify, and that is what the company is driving for. If you want to hire somebody, you need to prove that you can't do it with AI first. Well, as we highlighted in the conversation with Colonel Schaffner, and as Joel and I have been talking about constantly over the last few months, if you want to talk about another organization that is trying to go AI first, it is the US government. Everybody who wants to talk about Doge and what Elon Musk has been doing in the context of cost cutting is totally missing the story, which is Elon's last 4 months have been about setting the foundation for unlocking AI with US government, which is the real Doge agenda. But all that was about phase one. Elon just recently in Tesla's most recent earnings call announced he is stepping back from Doge. Not completely, he's just taking less time at Doge. But that signal right there is not a reason to think that that means Doge is over. In fact, it is because the fact that he thinks he has clearly laid down the groundwork to be able to go to Doge phase 2. Joel, Colonel Schaffner, and I just released a very special discussion about this topic, and not just about what the big things that are going on with the government, but what that means for the stock market and 4 specific companies we think could soar because of it. If you want to know more about that, please just click on the link below.
Let's talk earnings and favorite pastime.
So let me just say, earnings
Wall Street. It's 2.5x
because their compensation goes up.
Wall Street's wrong again.
And so now let's talk Shopify. Let's talk earnings uncensored. So, right, everybody, we were talking earlier about how Doge is trying to unlock AI for the federal government. Well, the federal government isn't the only place where AI is exploding. One of the things that we talk a lot about, Joel, is this idea of users of AI are going to be the people who end up being the biggest beneficiaries because they get to benefit from both sides. They get new revenue from new products, but then they also get to cut costs. And it's funny, everybody talks about Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, companies like Shopify, right, are the ones who, in theory, are the most possible beneficiaries.
Yes.
Right? For anybody who doesn't know, Shopify, they basically run the e-commerce site for basically any business that you probably shop with that isn't Amazon-based.
Used to be only small businesses, but they made big inroads with Barnes & Noble and other large companies that are on their platform now for e-commerce. What's amazing is they are truly an AI pivot. It is not just the headline you had is, one, we're not going to hire anybody else unless you can prove it can't be done by AI, right? And that's a tall statement because so many things can be done by AI at this point. But they're also, that's in their inside of the company, but externally, there are all kinds of small merchants, little places that only do $1 million in sales or $2 million or $3 million a year that couldn't possibly build in their own AI system, and they don't have to because they can use Shopify's AI for Merchants platform, which is already pretty amazing in terms of what it can do for giving a really small business some really high-powered e-commerce AI-enabled capabilities. And I think that's what's so interesting about Shopify.
Yeah, right. And so, Joel, to your point, I buried the lead. The whole entire story that we saw here that was so interesting was Shopify's CEO specifically went out and he said, nobody's allowed to hire anyone unless you literally prove for that job that you want done, AI can't do it.
Right.
And so you look at, this comes back to the idea of now let's look at profitability for this business. And so if you look for this business, you'd say, Joel, wow, on an as reported basis, this looks like a terrible company, but
the accountants, right, anyone that hasn't studied the CPA, which I have at length, and so when I started public accounting in 1991, you can't believe how complex the accounting is. But one of the issues is, over the last 30, 40 years, the accountants have become even more conservative. So accountants punish innovation. When companies spend on new products, on new development or whatever, they get unfairly punished, particularly in the early years. And that's exactly what's happening with Shopify. So when you look at Shopify, and you can look up in Yahoo Finance, or if you have Bloomberg or whatever, look at its return on assets. You will see a return on assets that's close to zero, if not slightly negative or slightly positive, that return on assets number. When in reality, if you said, no, let me properly handle innovation and R&D costs and whatever, and you put that into work, you would see that Shopify is actually an extremely well-profitable company. It's a solid business. They are getting in charge of premium, and customers are happy to do it because they are enabling small merchants to be able to act like big merchants, even if they're only doing 300 grand or 500 grand in sales a year, or 5 million or 10 million, and can't afford those big AI platforms. So Shopify's true return on assets is much higher than the accountants would suggest.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about here, everybody, just for context, order of magnitude. On an as-reported basis, it looks like last year might have been a 6% return on assets for sure Shopify. Before that, this company was floating plus or minus zero. On a uniform accounting basis, this company's return on assets has been above 20% every single year for the last 5 years.
Global corporate average is 6%. U.S. corporate average is 12%. Shopify is well over 20%. So it is a great business and great profitability. And GAAP accounting would not tell you that. The SEC official numbers that have to be published in financials would not tell you that. They're wrong.
And I mean, 2020 and 21 were great years for Shopify because the fact that that's when we had COVID, so everybody was flocking. And now the last 3 years haven't been as great. But what's interesting is, again, when we come back to those ideas, these light blue bars that you see here, the dark blue bars are history. That's what the company has done. The two light blue bars are what Wall Street analysts are forecasting Shopify is going to do in the next 2 years. And what they're showing you is Wall Street's saying, hey, because of AI, probably, in terms of how AI, them adopting AI from a cost perspective and from a revenue perspective, unlocks potential value. They don't have to pay as many coders to launch as many products. They don't also have to pay as many people to run customer service or anything else.
Right.
They're basically saying return on assets is going to start to ramp. And then when we get to the white bars, Joel, right? Now, the market has really, really high expectations for this company. It's expecting return on assets to rise. Peak ROA previously was around 50%, right? The market's expecting 75% return on assets going forward. That's high, but I think we would argue when you get into these companies that are in the epicenter of unlocking AI, the market's going to run ahead of reality. And so this isn't a nosebleed crazy idea here that they could really re-level profitability.
Yeah, basically the over-under, right, and that's what we build, the over-under for Shopify is, can this business's returns be 2.5 times bigger than they are right now? And given how great they are at their own internal AI and how they're able to enable AI, remember the AI enablers that we love so much, for all these millions of different companies and businesses and merchants, and the way they can really supercharge these small businesses' online presence, and the many case studies of just a little one AI initiative that increased some small $1 million firm's revenue to 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 million, like almost overnight in terms of the rate of change of what it can do. That seems like a reasonable target for me. In fact, I'm not saying right now back up the truck or anything on the stock, but it's an interesting name to watch that when these things, when AI takes off the way we really see it happening, you want to buy leadership, and I think Shopify is a true leader in this space.
Yep, exactly. And so everybody, thanks so much for joining us for the Altimetry Authority Day, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
All right, thanks everybody for tuning in. If you want to hear more and follow us on a daily basis, just click the first link below and be able to track what we're doing every single day.